Hey guys, this is Colin Moshman for PokerStrategy.com. Today we have footage kindly provided by my friend and fellow poker strategy coach James32 playing the Party Poker Sit and Go Hero format. Now before we start this, let's talk about the main differences between this and other spin and go type formats. So the first one is that it is four-handed. And the second one is that in every game, one player is randomly selected to be the bounty. And here, for example, this is a $1 game. The total prize pool is $2, and the bounty is always going to be 1/4 of that amount. So in this case, this player has a bounty on his head of 50 cents, and the winner will get $1.50. So the two main adjustments we have to make, one is that in general we're going to be playing a bit tighter as a natural result of moving from three-handed to four-handed play. And the other is that, of course, we should be much more inclined to try to get it in against the bounty when we have him covered by open shoving wider into him, 3-bet shoving wider, and otherwise playing more aggressive against him. When we're the bounty, we should take that into account that other players are going to stack off a lot later against us. So with that said, let's go ahead and see how these games play out. So first we'll notice the drawing for the bounty, which is pretty dramatic. I like the way Party does this. It's pretty cool. Bounty is selected and always going to be noted with that red arrow. So 10-9 suited, good open. We should pretty much be min-raising at 10-20. And nice flop. We have double overcards. We've got the gut shot, the flush draw, so I'll definitely put in a raise here and be willing to stack off if he 3-bet shoves. Now the key thing here in the turn on the right table is we want to divide this up into 2 more betting rounds, so I would bet something like half pot here with the plan of shoving almost any river. And nice river value shove there, our opponent folds. And every time that we accumulate chips, we are also going to have a better chance of being the one who gets the bounty so long as the bounty has not busted yet. Now one of the things I mentioned earlier is that when we're the bounty, we really need to take that into account. And some players are going to stack off wildly wider against us when we are the bounty. And so what that's going to mean is that high card hands are going to go up in value, and semi-bluff kind of shoves, for example, shoving a hand like 5-4 suited pre-flop, it's not going to be as good an open shove candidate because of the fact that there is the bounty on us and we'll get called wider. So good open with the king 3 offsuit in the small blind. And ace queen off I think is probably right around the bottom of our stack off range. Doesn't work out, but definitely the right call by James. I guess there I probably would have called ace jack offsuit and I would have folded ace 10 offsuit in that spot. And then other hands I call would be pocket sevens, maybe king queen suited, ace 10 suited. It's nice if we have any kind of read, but obviously in most of these low stakes spin formats we're going to be going pretty much read this in the early blind levels. So when this player limps on the right table, it looks like James is coming with the raise. I like this a lot. Usually these small blind open limps, when there's no history, are going to be weak. When he donk bets half pot, I would tend to fold. If we had a backdoor flush draw, then I would play on in that pot. But when he donk bets half pot and we just have the double overcards, nothing else going, that's a good fold there. And the left table we face the min 3-bet and just going to call, getting the great price pre, and check fold the flop. So interesting action on the right. The bounty gets all in, kind of spewing it off there. And now something very interesting happens. Okay, so here he's got 5 chips left, and we should play 100% of hands here. And I would prefer to see a raise because it'd be really nice if we could get rid of the big blind. So what I would do here is, first of all, we could just go ahead and shove. But if we raise call. And once the big blind raised, this is a great 3-bet shove to try to knock him out. We really can't leave that pot given that the bounty's in for such a short stack. So that one doesn't work out, but really important in a spot like that when the bounty is almost always going to be calling off his last few chips in the small blind to play every hand. I think what I would do most commonly on the button there is just go ahead and open shove, trying to knock out the big blind and get heads up with the bounty with their low pocket pair. But particularly if he's aggressive, then limp 3-bet is a nice line as well. So 2 more games up. And with 10-6 suited, a lot of the time in the small blind, this effective stack, I would open limp. Give the guy not as good a limp reward ratio for open raising. Raise is good too, though, particularly against someone playing tighter. And here we should be raising wider. Well, I was going to say, given that the bounty's the player in the big blind, but the key difference there is that we don't cover him. So now the fact that he has a bounty really is not going to change our play much. So from the cutoff, I would open any suited ace and offsuit aces down to ace 6 or 7 offsuit. I'd fold the low offsuit aces. On the left-hand table, it looks like the player to our left might be a maniac. He's been playing super loose. Here, for example, I would definitely, if it folds to us, look to raise call, a small raise to induce with the ace-8 suited. And the fact of him potentially being a maniac is that we would enter pots a bit tighter and stack off wider against him. So ace-8 suited is a nice shove. If we were deeper, let's say, for example, that we had 420 chips, that'd be a bit deep to shove. But there we're under 20 blinds effective, and with 2.5 blinds in the pot, I like just shoving it in, given they're out of position. If the cutoff limped and were the button, I would still raise small there, but out of position, it's a solid shove over that limp. Right table, like I said, any suited ace, definitely the right open there. And left table here, he's got 2 options. Well, he's got a lot of options, but the main options here are 3-bet small and 3-bet shove. And I really like the small 3-bet. This guy, like we said, he seems to be going crazy. And right here, he 4-bets again. So by 3-betting small, we keep his range wider. We give him more opportunity to spew it off. And now it's just a shove. So when he 4-bet there, I would tend to just 4-bet shove. I think we've got pretty good equity given that he's a maniac. There's a lot out there, so we don't really mind if he folds. And it looks like James was completely right to be cautious. He had aces, but I would have probably just thrown caution to the wind and jammed on him once he 4-bet us free. Alright, so let's see if we get a big prize pull, if we get to be the bounty this time in the left table. $2 prize pull. Definitely like the drama in these. And I'm sure sooner or later we will be the ones who get that special bounty. So on the button, King 6 off is kind of borderline. If the cutoff folds, I would be opening King 8 off for sure. I would definitely be folding low offsuit kings. King 6 off most of the time, I would just open fold on the button without a read. Right table, 4-5 suited is good. Again, the other option here at this kind of stack between 15 and 20 blinds with a speculative hand like this is to open limp. A lot of it just comes down to style and any history. Dead small blind on the left-hand table, we're going to open, and if, for example, the big blind 3-bets there, we would be stacking off, of course, with the pocket 7s. And this will be interesting to see if James c-bets this or not. And against 2 players, I like the check. I wouldn't make a delayed c-bet, however. If the big blind checks here, I'd toss in a delayed c-bet of about 65. And I still would have bet the river. I would have made kind of a small value blocking bet there. When our opponent pots it, I completely agree with the fold. But if he had checked it, I would tend to bet something like 40 into 120. So left table, that guy's tanking. I would often put out a small bet at the turn once the flop is checked around and we connect some, put out a bet of about 35 at the turn, just so that we don't give a combined 12 out draw or something a free shot to draw out on us. So here's the Jack 5 offsuit. Normally, like let's say for example on a star spin I would fold, but with this guy having the bounty I wouldn't fold. Depending on when we thought about him, a lot of the time I would just open shove for close to 20 blinds, given that the bounty, pretty large bounty, is out there on him. So 10-8 off is going to play fine as either on the right-hand table or raise or check pre. When we check and the small blind checks again, definitely bet the flop. So very nice flop bet there to take that down, and Queen 5 suited, the right complete. Looks like on the left-hand table we have another loose cannon, one player to our right. Could be giving us some good opportunities. So Queen 5 suited, if we don't just bet the flop, the turn is a mandatory bet here. So nice bet. And our opponent calls. So we could check to induce. Strauss should be a decent part of his range. But that does risk only one bet going in with top pair. So fairly close spot there. Meanwhile, Jack 10 offsuit is going to be an open. Should just toss in a min raise here. The bounty gets involved, but again, doesn't matter all that much for our purposes, given that the bounty covers us. So here I would definitely c-bet, and c-bet about 65, or half pot. And 65, perfect. So now we're heads up against the bounty. And the fact that he's the bounty doesn't change our play at all when we're heads up. Either way, we're just going to be playing for the win. It's not like, we can play any more for the win now that it's heads up. A nice double barrel there. So we're just going to be playing a standard CEV game here and hope to take him down and win this full $6. Check on the range, he min bets. I would tend to take a turn card here. It's fairly close. If he bets 60, I would fold. When he min bets, I would normally call one. See what happens. Lose a flip on the left, unfortunately. You see we c-bet, nice small sizing to try to keep his range wider, but he just check folds. Seems like so far on the right table he has been playing a little bit on the more passive side so far heads up. So left table we're going to c-bet. Right table I would probably check raise when he min bets. A lot of the time actually I just go right ahead and bet that flop. And here I would definitely put in the check raise. He's min betting again, looks pretty weak. A lot of hands that he could outdraw us with. And this check raise is a little bit on the smaller side. I would tend to make it slightly larger. But nice line there. King 9 I would call here. And 6-2 suited on the right. I would value bet at this point. Pretty hard for him to have better. He could hero call us with a high card. Now the blinds go up. We're about 16 blinds effective. And based on the way he's been playing, I like the strategy. You're going to be playing most hands here. And tough spot on the right. Generally, I would stack off here, 16 blinds with second pair. Based on the way this guy's been playing, this is a fairly close spot. And James decides to shove, and it's a split. He did have the higher kicker. And normally I definitely like that shove. You know, it's a raised pot, 16 blinds effective. We have second pair. And it's probably still good against that guy, but it's a lot closer based on the fact that he has seemed to play fairly passively so far in this heads-up match. King Jack offsuit, we're going to raise call. Here we can get away with a very small c-bet. I would c-bet about 68, 75. 90 is good too. Ace queen, a clear jam. And if we win this pot on the left, well, I was thinking if we win by him folding, then we recover the bounty. So, not the best run so far, but that's alright. He's a trooper. Nice bet on the turn of the right-hand table. Our opponent's showing weakness, and he pounces on it. So, very nice bet. 6-4 off, now we're even slightly shorter. This is going to be another one where it's going to be very tough to get away from, so probably going to bet about half pot here, exactly, and stack off facing check raise. Alright, and now we are the first bounty. That's awesome. I was kind of worried he might go half an hour and not get the bounty at all. But we did it. We're the bounty. So again, the big things here are that we want to account for the fact that people are going to be willing to stack off wider against us, or at least it's very likely that they will do that. Some of the time, in some ways, recreational players do not adjust well, and in some ways they tend to adjust very well or even over adjust. So most recreational players will absolutely adjust the fact that we have a bounty on ourselves. Right on table, I would just bet right out most of the time. Don't really want that to get checked back. And a nice check raise here. Clear stack off. Man, how do we miss that? So 8-6 suited, we're now well under 10 blinds, so a nice open shove there. And because we get in bad, we win. One of those nice rolls of poker. Queen 10 off, we're going to snap call or shove over his limp. So here with the 8-deuce offsuit, normally that is just a fold. And there it's particularly a fold. So if we've got some kind of marginal hand that we're consider opening, we shouldn't open it because it's just very likely that we're going to get played back at more often. A6, I would tend to c-bet that flop. Our hand's going to be best a lot. Don't really want to give a free card. But awesome turn here. We're going to raise and be elated to stack off. But our opponent folds. And now the dynamic changes because we cover. So it's likely that people are going to correctly not play wider against us. It's not a guarantee. To be honest, I've had times when I'm like not playing these party spins, but like in Stars Bounties, where I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to call this guy so wide, you know, with the bounty. And then I do, and then I realize, oh wait, he covers me. Probably wasn't the best call. Hopefully this happened to all of us. I don't know, but in theory at least, people should not be playing wider against us when we cover. So this is kind of a tricky spot. If we're a little bit shorter, that's nice because we can just shove. But 30 blinds, I wouldn't shove. And checking and raising pre are both very reasonable options. James elects to take the aggressive line. He raises pre and he c-bets, and I like that line a lot. And that lets him take it down. A7 off, I would open. And c-bet. This isn't crazy to be checked back. The advantage of checking back is that when we do bet, normally if he has better than ace high, he's not going to fold. If he has worse than ace high, he is going to fold. But at the same time, it makes the hand a lot easier to play. It doesn't give him a free shot at 6 or more outs. So it can definitely be easier to c-bet those spots, even if they are not Dan Harrington approved. So on the left-hand table, we should shove tighter, given that there's no small blind. But here I would still shove the 10-9 off. Interesting min raise. I assume that pre-flop we would raise call. We're a little bit too shallow to fold. And this is a snap here at the flop. There's no way we can fold that, so nice call. There's poker trivia that you might hear occasionally, and this dead small blind thing gives us the answer, which is, what is a time in poker where you're considering a call and you are not getting any pot odds? And the answer to that, or one answer at least, is when there's a dead small blind, the big blind's put all in for the big blind. So let's say he's put all in for his last 20 chips, and so the pot's 20, it costs you 20 to call. Not the most relevant, but I thought of it for some reason. So here he bets out. Looks like James is consuming a hero call on this double paired board. Kind of interesting whether the big blind might be going after value with ace high there. And 5-7 offsuit will fold. We would shove with that 5-7 offsuit. We'd shove down to hands like Queen Jack suited, King Jack off, most suited aces, ace 8 off, right around there. Ace 6 I like just open shoving. And we'll click to get back in. Pretty surprising this guy calls it off. Oh, well, we're the bounty. So that is the reason. Okay, so that's exactly what I'm talking about before. And that's a fine call on his part because we have the bounty. And so there it works for us. And that was a very good kind of hand to shove. A low offsuit ace kind of hand compared to a speculative hand because players are going to call us wider. So be on the lookout for that. King 7 off, I would just jam in pre. Would still do that even if the small blind completed. He's just very unlikely to complete and then call us off. We jam in or 15 blinds there. So heads up again for the bounty and the remainder of the prize pool. $3 in the normal prize pool and $1 for the bounty. And I expect a pretty small c-bet here. Something around 50, 60. Looks good. Meanwhile, right-hand table in this three-way pot. So this is interesting. He bets small. And I really like this bet. It can definitely encourage recreational players to stick around wider and make incorrect stack-offs compared to just jamming the flop, even though it's such a good risk-reward ratio jamming the flop. And I think that in that spot on the right-hand table, he got much more value than I would have gotten, than most players would have gotten, just by dividing that up into 2 betting rounds and getting Sweet Knight to stack off so light. Because my guess is that if he just jams flop, Sweet Knight folds. And it's really easy to think, okay, well, my stack is less than pot. I've got the overpair. I'm just going to shove. But against recreational players, they're often better lines. And I think right there, James just took a much better line. So Queen 4 offsuit is a good kind of hand to open min raise here. Its blocker hand doesn't play all that well. So it's a very good raise fold candidate. And Queen Jack suited. Usually a 3-bet shove here. Obviously flatting is profitable as well. A lot of it comes down to effective stack. I'm guessing a little bit shorter and he would have shoved. And good call with King 8 suited. Definitely a Nash call. But unfortunately we can't get there. One more shot at a massive prize pool on the right-hand table. Still waiting for two more players. Big bounty draw. Need three off, we just fold. I agree with folding the junk hands. And continual bottom 10% hands on the button. Ace 4 off now if he min raises. I assume we're just going to 3-bet shove here. Solid correct play. Nash 3-bet shove range about top 50%, including actually low offsuit kings generally, which not always shove I make. But at 15 blinds, we're out of position facing a min raise. Just shoving the low offsuit ace tends to be, in my opinion at least, by far the best play. On the right hand table, when the cutoff open 4x is the first hand, right away that gives us a clue that he's likely going to be some loose cannon, sort of lag crazy player, and that could be wrong, but it's a good assumption to make, and as long as we're prepared to update that assumption if things change. So king 4 offsuit would tend to min raise fold. The other option is just open shove. There hasn't been too much 3-betting on the left match, but that's pretty close at around 10 or 11 blinds. Both are good options. Queen Jack, solid 3-bet shove here. And our opponent calls to the 4-5 suited, which is pretty crazy. And I think that the reason he's doing that is because of the bounty. But here, like we said, in heads up, we're just going to be trying to play as much as we can for the win. So the bounty no longer really impacts it. Either that or he just wanted to gamble, but either way, an incorrect call. Queen 9 off here is a Nash call. And I would tend to make it against this guy. Against some recreational players, I would fold, but we're under 10 blinds here. I think it's a Nash call for close to 11, something like that. And they're at about 9 blinds, and also look like that guy might be kind of tilted and frustrated after seeing that 5-4 suited call. So he thinks about it, James thinks about it for a little bit, and then makes a solid call. Always satisfying to win those ones where you're the bounty. So we're going to go through another few minutes of footage. And on the right table, King 10 offsuit. It's pretty interesting when you open 3 X's. None of our options are that crazy, folding, calling, or 3-bet shoving. If we had any kind of stats on him, it would be super useful. But I like the decision to flat. That's certainly reasonable. $4 prize pool. And you can go and take a look. There's on Party Poker and on Poker Strategy, there's a thread that gives each of the different buy-ins. And so, for example, in a $1 buy-in Sin and Go Hero, what percent of the time is the prize pool $2, what percent of the time is it $4, etc. And that also gives the bounty each time, which again is just going to be 1/4 of this total prize amount. So a massive 3-way all-in on the left. And fortunately for us, the bounty wins, so now we still have our equity in this game from having a shot at winning the bounty. Right table, I would tend to go with it with the ace 3 off. This guy seems very loose, and this is kind of similar to blind versus blind spot in that the small blind's very short, so we could be opening wider. Pretty close though. No problems either way there. 7-6 suited is interesting. I would probably fold that free, but definitely fairly close given that we're getting the price in the small blind. And now a shove with the king queen off. Very nice shove, definitely correct. Ace 4 off, so I tend to check back with the backdoor flush draw as well, and ace high. Coordinated flop, I definitely like that check back. And when we check back, we're not always giving up when we miss in the turn. So here, if he bets out the turn, I would usually call. And when he checks, I would now go ahead and bet, not give him a chance to realize his equity. So generally, I'd bet that turn and call if he's the one who bets. Good fold with jack 5 off. Snap call with ace 8 suited. And a nice turn for us. And we're still at 1020, so the effective stack is going to be deeper than it normally is heads up at about 35 blinds. So king 6 off, I would generally check back here. If he min raised, I would usually call. Occasionally 3-bet, but most of the time just call. And I would not fold facing a min raise with king 6 off from the big blind. So let's go ahead and we will watch the rest of this game. Hopefully we see a comeback. Generally on this flop I would bet out because I don't really want to check fold or check raise. And check calling, not too much good is going to come on the turn most of the time. So a lot of time in spots like that, and limp pots from the big blind heads up, I'll tend to bet out. 10-9 suited, we get walked. 9-5, I would generally min raise. Calling's fine too. Folding slightly tight, but no problems there. So again, one thing that I might do a little bit more here is bet out in limp pots from the big blind. And as played, we have to call that bet with the queen of diamonds and third pair. And here in the river, this is kind of tricky if he bets. If he bets something large, I assume we're just going to give this up. And he overbets. So the effect of the overbet is to really polarize his range. And so when I said polarize his range, and he showed up with naked king, that's the exact opposite. Okay, so that was the kind of hand that I exactly did not expect for him to have, that king 5. So in theory, when someone overbets, that's going to tend to polarize their range, give them more nuts, more total air hands. And I guess our opponent is more advanced. He's involved in a tripper range merge, that kind of thing. But overall, very cool format. And James32, thanks for providing this footage and playing extremely well. Some very cool lines. If you guys have any questions on these games or the Party Poker Sit and Go Hero format, please feel free to leave them in the thread, and I'll be more than happy to answer. This has been Colin Moshman for PokerStrategy.com.